Good morning, everyone. Let us come to order and go on the record. I am Commissioner Karen M. Kimmerite with the North Carolina Utilities Commission, and I have been assigned to preside over this hearing. With me this morning are Commissioners Tanola D. Brown-Bland and Kimberly W. Duffley. I now call for hearing docket number G-5 sub 661, which is in the matter of application of Public Service Company of North Carolina, Inc., that I'll refer to going forward as PSNC or Public Service, for annual review of gas costs pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 62-133.4C, and Commission Rule R1-17K6. North Carolina General Statute 62-133.4 authorizes gas cost adjustment proceedings for natural gas local distribution companies. North Carolina General Statute Section 62-133.4C provides that the Utilities Commission shall conduct annual review proceedings to compare each natural gas utility's prudently incurred costs with costs recovered from all of the utility's customers served during the test period. Commission Rule R1-17K6 prescribes the procedures for such annual reviews of natural gas costs. On June 1st, 2023, PSNC filed public and confidential versions of the direct testimony of Rose M. Jackson and direct testimony of Gloria J. Creel in this annual review proceeding. On June 6, 2023, the Commission issued an order scheduling hearing, requiring filing of testimony, establishing discovery guidelines, and requiring public notice, which I will refer to going forward as the scheduling order. The scheduling order scheduled a hearing for this date and time. On June 16, 2023, PSNC filed public and confidential versions of the supplemental direct testimony of Rose M. Jackson. On July 7, 2023, PSNC filed Rose M. Jackson's revised direct Exhibit 2. On July 24, 2023, PSNC filed public and confidential versions of the second supplemental testimony and exhibits for Rose M. Jackson. Also, on July 24, 2023, the public staff filed a motion and the Commission issued an order for a one-day extension of time for the public staff and other interveners to file testimony. On July 25, 2023, the public staff filed the testimony and appendices of Ken Fin Sun and Blaze C. Michna. On July 31, 2023, PSNC filed affidavits of publication of public notice in compliance with the scheduling order. In compliance with the requirements of Chapter 163A of the State Government Ethics Act, I remind the members of the Commission of their responsibility to avoid conflicts of interest, and I inquire whether any member has a conflict of interest with respect to the matter before us in this proceeding. Let the record reflect that I have no such conflict and that my fellow commissioners have not identified any such conflict. I now call for appearances of counsel, beginning with PSNC.
Good morning, Commissioner Kimmerite. Commissioners, I'm Mary Lynn Grigg with the law firm of McGuire Woods, appearing on behalf of PSNC.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kristen Athens with the law firm of McGuire Woods, also appearing on behalf of PSNC this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Elizabeth Culpepper with the public staff, appearing on behalf of the using and consuming public.
Okay. Good morning, Ms. Culpepper. Are there any preliminary matters which need to be addressed prior to the beginning of the hearing?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So since there are no preliminary matters to be addressed, we'll go ahead and proceed with the hearing. Has the public staff identified any public witnesses who wish to testify in this proceeding?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And to make sure that the record is clear, are there any members of the public that are here in the hearing room this morning who wish to testify in this proceeding? Okay. Let the record reflect that no members of the public are in the hearing room and have asked to testify in the proceeding. So counsel for PSNC may proceed to present the company's witnesses.
Thank you. At this time, the company calls Ms. Rose Jackson to the stand.
Good morning, Ms. Jackson. Good morning. Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. And do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please state your name and business address for the record.
Rose M. Jackson, and my business address is 220 Operation Way, Casey, South Carolina.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the Dominion Energy Services as the Director of Fuel Commodities.
Did you cause to be filed 20 typed pages of question and answer testimony of Rose M. Jackson, 2 exhibits, which was filed in public version in this proceeding on June 1st, 2023,
Yes, ma'am.
and an attachment to Exhibit 2, which was marked confidential, also filed on June 1st?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you also cause to be filed 3 typed pages of question and answer testimony of the supplemental direct testimony of Rose M. Jackson, which was filed confidentially and in public version in this proceeding on June 16th, 2023?
Yes, ma'am.
Finally, did you also cause to be filed on July 24th, 2023, 4 pages of question and answer testimony of the second supplemental direct testimony of Rose M. Jackson, which was filed confidentially and publicly?
Yes, ma'am.
With that testimony, you filed 3 exhibits, correct?
Yes, I did.
And of those 3 exhibits, the exhibit which was pre-marked Jackson's second supplemental direct, Exhibit 2, was confidential.
That's correct.
Were those documents prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes, ma'am, they were.
Do you have any corrections or additions to those documents?
No, I do not.
If I were to ask you the questions appearing in those testimonies today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, ma'am, they would.
Commissioner Kimmerite, we'd ask that Ms. Jackson's direct testimony, supplemental testimony, and second supplemental testimonies be marked for identification and entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
And Ms. Grigg, for clarification for the direct testimony, did you indicate that there were 2 exhibits or 3 exhibits?
She has 3 exhibits.
Yeah, my records indicate 3 exhibits, but I may have misheard you because I thought you indicated 2 exhibits.
2 exhibits. Two
Direct has 2.
2 exhibits? Okay.
2 exhibits, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So your motion is allowed. Ms. Jackson's direct testimony filed on June 1st of 2023, consisting of 20 pages with 2 exhibits attached. Her supplemental direct testimony filed on June 16 of 2023, consisting of 3 pages, and second supplemental testimony filed on July 24, 2023, consisting of 4 pages with 3 exhibits will be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand, and the exhibits will be marked for identification purposes as pre-filed.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jackson is available for questions.
And my understanding is that the public staff has waived cross-examination of Ms. Jackson. Is
That's
that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Kimmerite, there are 3. I apologize in my direct. 1 was marked confidential.
Sorry.
So, I will admit for identification purposes for the 3 exhibits that were attached to Ms. Jackson's direct testimony will be marked for identification purposes as pre-filed.
Thank you,
So we will
ma'am. Thank
correct the
you.
record.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Jackson, the commission has several questions for you that really are going to be talking about what happened during Winter Storm Elliott, what Psnc has done since or learned since Winter Storm Elliott to ensure that the system remains reliable. So that's kind of I think what we're mostly trying to get some more information about.
Okay.
So if you can begin by explaining, just giving the commission an explanation or an overview about how Psnc prepared for Winter Storm Elliott. And I know that you've walked the commission through this previously, but I think we'd like to have an update and some additional information.
Yes, ma'am. In preparation for Winter Storm Elliott or any major winter storm similar to that event, we go into that period forecasting what our design day demand would be for that period. So we're focused on our firm customer demand. And we look back at historical weather patterns that could help us determine what that design day component or that firm demand component would be for that weather event. So we were prepared for that. The Saturday, which happened to be Christmas Eve, was when we anticipated that the bulk or the difficult part of that weather event would occur. So going into that weekend, we were set up, we had sufficient supply. We were prepared to meet our forecasted firm demand for that weekend event. And the only issues that we faced, we had a small force majeure from one of our suppliers that affected less than 1% of our supply. But the event that occurred that we were not anticipating is the lower than historical pressures on Transco's system at our interconnect with our LDC distribution system. So previously, we had modeled all of the gas coming into PSNC system at around 625 to 650 pounds. And what we actually, what actually occurred on those days was around 450 pounds of pressure. So what happened is it limited how much gas we could bring into our system. While Transco has stated publicly that they met all of their delivery obligations, we have never seen pressures that low on Transco's system. So as a follow-up, we have had a few meetings with them, one in particular where we went through with our engineering group and we said, do we need to change our model? Because your tariff specifically states that the minimum pressure guarantee on your system is 50 pounds. And we said, can you model that for us? What does that look like? How much gas would you be able to get to PSNC City Gates if it were 50 pounds? And they said, no, that is left over from long ago. The 50 pounds is not something we should focus on. It should be, they suggested we use 425 because at that point in time, they have to dispatch people to man their compressor stations.
Can I interrupt you for a minute? You mentioned 425 what?
Pounds, PSI, G.
Okay, so we've gone from 50 pounds to 425 pounds.
That's what they suggested we model. So that is one of the things that we will request in the next Transco rate case that they're required to file third quarter of next year. We think that they should update their tariff to state that the minimum pressure on their system should be 425. Because if they can't prepare a model that shows and demonstrates what the 50 pounds would look like, we need to be accurate in what we're stating in the tariff. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the changes we will be asking for.
And about the 425 pound, do you and PSNC believe that if it has been updated on Transco for 425 pounds, that will ensure that the pressure problem will be alleviated or addressed?
I can't state that for sure because in another jurisdiction, we had a minimum pressure guarantee in a contract and that was not met. I think the real issue is that in the event that an interstate pipeline does not meet their contractual minimum pressures, what they're required to do is refund the reservation fees associated with those volumes. But that doesn't even compare to what we're faced with paying to replace that gas. So that's the real concern is what can we do long-term in the event that we see lower than normal pressures on their system. And I think one of the changes that we're looking at is that second LNG facility on our system, because that is on our distribution system. We control the dispatch of it and we can control the pressure on the outlet side of that plant. So in the event that we were to have any type of unusual circumstance on an interstate pipeline, that will provide us with on-system supply that will back up any volumes that we can't take into our system from the interstate pipelines.
So backing up to issues that you experienced on Transco, and you've talked specifically about the low pressure issues, were there any other problems or issues with Transco during Winter Storm Elliott in addition to the low pressure issue?
One of the things that they have stated is that they communicated with the various parties prior to Winter Storm Elliott. That did not occur in the southern region. They have told us since that they have a coordination meeting in the northern region where they have all the different shippers that include LDCs, power generation plants. They also include interconnecting pipelines in that meeting to discuss and to prepare for a weather event such as Winter Storm Elliott. That did not occur in the southern region. So we have asked that they that they plan to have those types of communication meetings and preparation meetings in advance of another storm with the southern region. We think it's very important that they include the interconnecting pipelines, as well as the shippers that would also include the LDCs and the power generation facilities on their system in the southern region.
And has Transco committed to having the meeting that you have requested or said that is necessary with the southern region? Have they committed to doing so going forward?
They are evaluating that, but they said that they would cooperate with us in doing so.
Okay. And you talked about one of the suppliers declared force majeure and did not perform. It was just one supplier that declared force majeure, and that was 1%. Is that your testimony?
Yes, ma'am. So very small volume.
Okay. And just to be clear, did any other suppliers fail to meet their contractual supply requirements?
No,
It was just that one force majeure situation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And in your testimony, you talked about that the pressures dropped at the Dan River takeoff location from the historical operating pressures. Were there any other drops in pressure at any other takeoff locations in North Carolina, or was that the only one that you experienced?
We had drops at other locations, but the Dan River point, I think, was impacted greater because that's where the null point, or where the volumes that are flowing from the Gulf to the north and the north to the south, that null point was fluctuating right there around Dan River. And what we saw is because the pressure, the temperatures dropped so severely in such a short period of time on Christmas Eve, that Saturday, we did not get notified. I was on the phone with Transco representatives from right after lunch that day on into the night. And what they were telling us is that they were noticing that supply was not coming in on the receipt side of their system. So that was pulling down their line pack on their system. But then when prices posted for that day, typically prices do post in the morning time period. We contacted 17 suppliers before we could find any amount of gas to purchase. And the price of that gas was so high, so much higher than what the OFO, or the operational flow order penalty on Transco's system was. Then you started seeing shippers that were overtaking Transco's system. So what happened is you had supply not coming in on the receipt side and gas going out on the delivery side that was not scheduled or accounted for. So line pack just dropped tremendously on Transco's system. And because we sit at the null point, that's why Dan River was so greatly affected with the pressure drop.
Okay. And can you tell me what other takeoff locations where the pressure did drop that affected Psnc in addition to Dan River, if you have that information handy?
I don't have that specifically. Okay. I just know that one in particular, and of course, because our largest load center is in that Raleigh-Durham area, so Dan River feeds that area. So that was our greatest concern.
Okay. And then in your testimony, you testified that Psnc was unable to deliver quantities of peaking and off-system storage as originally planned. And then you testified that Psnc curtailed interruptible customers and made additional withdrawals of gas from the on-system LNG facility at the Cary Energy Center.
Yes, ma'am.
And did the use of LNG from the Cary storage facility cause problems for supply after Winter Storm Elliott? Did you experience any problems because you had to use that capacity after Winter Storm Elliott? Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. If you look at our January and February weather, it was actually warmer than normal. So December was our coldest month of this past winter season. So we were very fortunate that we didn't have any similar weather patterns to come through.
Okay.
So we had no impact in the later months of the winter.
Okay. And then you also testified that after Winter Storm Elliott, some of the industrial customers converted from interruptible sales to firm sales.
Yes, ma'am.
And has that change from interruptible to firm sales, has that had any impact on Psnc?
No, ma'am. What we've done is we plan for those firm customers, whether it be residential, commercial, or firm, that goes into our planning, into our planning numbers. And it also helps us when we forecast on a daily basis. And we have movement going the other way as well. So we have our annual election that takes place on June 1st, and we will have some customers that convert from interruptible to firm, and we have some customers that convert from firm to interruptible. So there was no net increase this year, but what we do is make sure that as they convert to the firm requirement, that goes into our daily forecast for firm customers.
Okay. And Ms. Jackson, you've talked a lot about this, but I thought it would be helpful just for the record to get this stated pretty succinctly. But can you describe the actions that PSNC has taken after Winter Storm Elliott to ensure that PSNC will be as well prepared as possible for another storm event like this, and to as best as possible ensure that Winter Storm Elliott situation does not happen again? And just for the record, provide information to kind of succinctly for the record.
Okay. Overall, our system performed very well. We were prepared as we went into the weekend for Winter Storm Elliott. We had supply sufficient to meet our firm customer demands, and we had backup through our Cary LNG facility in the event that the firm demand forecast was higher than we anticipated. So other than having the lower than normal pressures associated with Transco's system, we have gone back, we're updating our models. As you can imagine, this is a lengthy process. So we're going through updating our models to reflect the 425 pounds of pressure. We're evaluating what type of distribution changes may be needed. One of those changes is looking at, as part of our long-term IMT projects, what we'll have to do as part of that to upgrade our system. So we are trying to determine where we can do changes on our system to help mitigate those lower than normal pressures in the future. But as I stated in my testimony, we do think that second LNG plant will help us in situations like that, because we can't control what happens on the interstate pipeline side. But if the plant is located on our distribution system, then that gives us the ability to dispatch outside of those scheduling requirements on the interstate pipeline. So when you see these colder than normal weather events that come through, it's difficult to determine how that's going to affect firm customer usage. So an LNG plant on our system helps us to meet as that demand changes over that day. So we can decide if we need to ramp up or decrease withdrawals from the LNG facility. So having that second facility in addition to Cary, I think will help us. We're also working with Transco and the other shippers. Transco has, they are evaluating what changes they need on their system. We have been in discussions with them for a number of years that as they added more capacity on a bi-directional flow basis, instead of going from the Gulf to the north, it flows from the north to the south. They have added a tremendous amount of capacity on their system without any additional storage. And so when you have greater volumes on your system, but you don't have a greater volume in storage to balance it, that's why it becomes more and more difficult. Our concern as a contract holder for storage on Transco's system and a firm transportation capacity holder, we don't want to see onerous operational requirements placed on the shippers and not placed on the upstream pipelines or the interconnecting pipelines. It is clear that during Winter Storm Elliott, part of the problem was on the receipt side, where these interconnecting pipelines did not have gas to show up to Transco's system. Currently today, they have operating balancing agreements with Transco, and there is no cash out provision in those. In most of those, they pay back in kind at a later date. So what Transco is asking for is to have daily requirements put on the shippers, but not have those same type of requirements placed on the interconnecting pipelines. So we're working very closely to revise the cash out mechanism. We just filed a settlement with FERC. We're also going to be working to find out how can we make sure that everybody is treated similarly on Transco's system. Because I don't think that the LDCs such as PSNC should be burdened with additional cost unless everybody's going to share in those costs.
And Ms. Jackson, you talked about the second LNG facility, and for the record, what is the proposal for the date that it would be in service?
We are anticipating that the plant will be ready to liquefy by 2027, but of course, it'll take us time to fill up the tank. So we are forecasting 2027 to 2028 will be the first winter season that we will have that available in the stack, if you will, to support our firm customer demand. So that's what we're planning for.
Okay. And in the period before the 2027, 2028, when the new LNG facility is in service, do you have concerns, or what is the company doing to ensure reliability during that period?
The only other option we currently have is to go out into the marketplace and seek these short-term peaking contracts of delivered supply, which includes capacity and supply with it. Of course, our design day is growing by approximately, I'd say somewhere between 15 and 20,000 decatherms a day. And so we are going to be faced with contracting for our higher volumes during that bridge period. Because as you're aware, the interstate pipeline capacity industry is very difficult to plan and forecast when new interstate pipeline capacity may be available. And much of that uncertainty is associated with litigation risk. And so there's no way to determine how long a litigated case may last. So it's not simply what is the timeline before FERC and other agencies approve these permits. Once permits are approved, then those permits can be litigated, and that's when it's very difficult to determine how long it could take for a pipeline to be built.
And for these short-term peaking contracts, is there sufficient capacity so that sufficient capacity for these short-term contracts? It is really the issue, the price that you'll have to pay. The capacity is there, but the cost will be greater, or is there concern about whether there's even sufficient capacity for the short-term contracts?
I think it's both, because as we're fortunate that as an LDC, our demand growth is growing by that 15 to 20,000 decatherms per year. But what's happening is that you had two major pipeline projects that were supposed to be in service today, Atlantic Coast Pipeline and Mountain Valley Pipeline. That was going to bring approximately 4.5 BCF of gas into Transco Zone 5. And so Atlantic Coast Pipeline has been canceled, Mountain Valley Pipeline has been delayed. And so what you see is the demand growth in the Southeast continues. And so each year we have more and more competition for that capacity and for that supply. So we are concerned, and that was one of the reasons we pulled forward our on-system LNG plant. We had originally anticipated that that project would be needed in that 2030 timeframe, but we, as a contingency, we had to find something in the event Mountain Valley Pipeline was further delayed or even canceled. So we felt like that would be the only option that we would have that would avoid that litigation risk, if you will, that an interstate pipeline could have. So that's what we're planning on to have in that 2027 winter. And we're hoping that Mountain Valley Pipeline is completed by the end of the year. And I think that will be very beneficial to Transco Zone 5, because right now we don't have enough supply flowing into that zone of delivery that PSNC is currently in.
Okay. And Ms. Jackson, I'm going to move on to what you've listed as Jackson Exhibit 1 that talks about the shortfall in your reserve margin.
Yes, ma'am.
And can you walk us through that exhibit and give a little bit more explanation about the shortfall that has increased and is expected to increase?
Okay, let's go to,
I believe it's Jackson Exhibit 1, I believe.
yes, ma'am. Okay. So if you look with my second supplemental, you'll see for this upcoming winter season, we have secured 75,000 decatherms of the short-term peaking. And that was with, filed with my last supplemental testimony, second supplemental testimony. So you'll see that we have a very small positive reserve margin.
Ms. Grigg, this is not a confidential exhibit, is it?
Oh, I'm sorry, this one
Let's
is.
Yeah,
make sure that
okay,
it's.
thank you.
Okay, I can go off direct exhibit 1.
Right.
But
Thank
if you
you.
take the 40,000 on the short-term peaking service, as I stated in my supplemental testimony, we have added 35,000 to that. So that takes us to a slightly positive reserve margin percentage. But then as you go out through time over the next 4 winters, you will see that we are working on renewing some of those short-term peaking contracts. But you'll see next winter season, we're short by 88,547. The next winter season, it's 105,000. The next winter season, it's 122,000. And then the timeline when the new LNG facility will be available for withdrawals, you'll see it's 139,390. So that also drove the size of the LNG facility that we were looking at. So in my second supplemental, that's what we focused on. As part of, we tried to determine what size facility we would need. And when you look at a 1 BCF tank, that only provides 100,000 decatherms of withdrawal for 10 days. So that was going to be insufficient in that 2027-28 timeframe. So then when you look at the 1.5 BCF, that would give us 150,000. So that would show roughly 6% reserve margin when that comes online. And when we did an analysis of the 1.5 BCF tank versus the 2 BCF tank, it was such a small increase that we made the decision that that 2 BCF tank was the most prudent decision to make going forward.
Okay. Yeah, and Ms. Grigg, I'm attempting to stay away from any confidential information or testimony. So if we start
Thank
moving
you.
in that direction, please let me know.
I'm
because-
watching.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. And Ms. Jackson, in regard to the 2 BCF sized facility, you talked about that there would be greater vaporization capability. Can you explain what vaporization capability, what benefit that would have and what that means?
It just allows us to vaporize or regasify the liquid in the tank. So instead of at a 1.5 BCF tank, we were anticipating 150,000 decatherms of withdrawal capability for 10 days. With increased vaporization at a 2 BCF tank, we'll be able to get an additional 50,000 a day out. So our maximum withdrawal will be 200,000 decatherms for a 10-day service.
Okay.
And it was such a small incremental cost differential, estimated to be around 2.5%, that, as you're aware, is very difficult. And the timelines of to construct anything is difficult. So we felt for that differential, it was more prudent to go with a larger tank.
Okay. And you've given us a lot of really good detailed information. I appreciate it. My last question is that the public staff had made a recommendation that the credit and the hedging deferred account be transferred to the deferred account. Is the company in agreement with the public staff's recommendation?
That is outside of my area of
Okay.
expertise.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. So I will look to my fellow commissioners to see if they have any questions. Okay. Commissioner Brown Bland?
Ms. Jackson, just to complete, you started to say with regard to the decrease, the 425-pound minimum that pressure that Transco says that's what you should model based on. You started to say because of that number, something changed for Transco. What was that?
Oh, I said we need to change their tariff provision additionally because their tariff currently states that the minimum guaranteed pressure on their system is 50 pounds. So we've asked them to model that to our system, what that looks like. And they're saying that would not be, it would be very difficult to model that. And that was left over from some older contract requirements. So we've asked them, as part of the next rate case, we're recommending that they update their tariff to reflect the 425.
Besides their word, do you have anything in the interim, as long as it's not a part of the tariff, to kind of hold them to the 425?
No, ma'am.
All right, but what I was getting at, I thought I didn't know if it meant there was something that happens that's manual on their side, but something about they have to send somebody.
Yes, ma'am. The 425 is based on the fact that if they drop below that 450 down to 425, they typically look at 450 pounds. But once it drops to the 450, they have told us that they have to dispatch personnel manually to the compressor stations. So that's why they don't believe that anything lower than that 425 range would occur, because they're going to have personnel on site to ensure that that 425 is met.
All right. And then a minute ago in your testimony, you talked about as a result of, it was part of the discussion about where the null point is and what happened with the winter storm Elliott, that you said, you used the phrase that they overtook, or somebody was overtaking the Transco system. Could you just flesh that out for me and what
Yes,
that
ma'am.
means?
It's my understanding that there were other shippers on Transco system, not PSNC, that decided to take more gas than what they had contracted for. So they didn't have sufficient capacity to deliver, but they continued to use gas, therefore having a short imbalance position. And I can't speak to exactly what their thought process was, but I will tell you that the market price of gas on that day was so much higher than the operational flow order penalty. It was an economic decision.
And other than a change in the economics of it, is there anything that we could do sitting here in North Carolina to help with that situation?
There are some changes that Transco is discussing with all the shippers on their system. One of the changes is we have an ability to do what we call retro nominations. So after the fact, people can request retro nominations on Transco system that trues up, how much gas is taken where. So one of the concerns that Transco has voiced is that the amount of operational flow order penalties that they thought they were going to bill versus the amount that they actually did bill, it was much lower because of these retro nominations, if you will. And we also have imbalance trading that can occur. So they are looking at tightening that up on these critical days, such as what we face with Winter Storm Elliott. So we're just beginning the discussion with them to see how that would work. But that will be a tariff change that is required, and it will tighten up on critical days like this to ensure that folks are staying within their contract rights.
Would the idea be that they would not, or somehow you would lessen the ability to do the retro nomination?
Okay. On those critical days, they would not approve retro nominations.
Okay. And just a question to my mind. I know that the LNG facilities generally fill up now during the summer.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any indication, just in terms of gas supply, is there any reason to be concerned about, planning for, see any reason there would be interruptions with the ability to get the new tanks filled?
We haven't encountered anything in the summer season as far as injection season goes with supply concerns. Of course, in the past, when we have hurricanes in the Gulf, we could typically see like limitations for those specific days. But since shale has been produced in the northeastern region with Marcellus, we haven't encountered those types of supply interruptions, because since Transco's system is truly bidirectional, we have a lot more flexibility in the summertime.
All right. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
I just had one follow-up to this conversation about the retro nominations and tightening those procedures up. But would that help with the fact that I thought I heard you say that because of the price of gas that day, even with the OFO penalties, it was still an economic decision whether you do the retro or not. So is there anything to solve that issue?
Transco has a number of items that we're looking at as far as tariff changes go, and they have just begun the discussion with the shippers on their system They have like a phased approach of when those tariff changes may be filed at FERC. But we're looking at different things like what should be the operational flow order penalty on critical days like that. But I do think by looking at these retros, the fact that customers would have encountered operational flow order penalties and they were able to reverse those before they're billed, I think that is one issue because it doesn't provide them with the proper incentive to make sure they stay within contract. But on days like Winter Storm Elliott, I've been in this business for 31 years, and that is the worst event that I have faced in my career. So I don't know how you plan for something like that until it actually happens. And so what we're trying to look at is what do we do in the future in the event we have something similar to this? And it's difficult. You have to really look at a lot of different pieces of their tariff because if they change one thing, it could affect us in another area. So I think it's going to be a lot of discussion, but I just don't want Transco to completely swing to the other side of the pendulum, if you will, where it's so restrictive that we lose all flexibility. And it won't just be the bad actors, if you will, those that overran the system. It will affect all of us. And so I just want to make sure that they're trying to prevent the people who violated the tariff. We need to make sure that those are the people they're focused on instead of making it so difficult for all of us who did what we should have on a daily basis. But I will tell you that they need to take a long, hard look at their system because they need additional storage and everybody should share in that cost, not just the storage holders that pay for that contract. They also need to look at how they operate their system because since that bidirectional flow of gas has occurred, I would tell you that Psnc should be one of the easiest customers to serve on the system because we're in the null point. So they should have much more flexibility to serve us in various ways. But they haven't done so. And I have complained about this for nearly a decade. So we continue to work with them very actively. There is a shipper working group. We're very actively involved in that, and we are very actively involved in their rate case proceedings.
And you mentioned this need for more storage on the system.
Yes, ma'am.
What activities are ongoing to modify the amount of storage currently on the system?
Transco is actively looking at incremental storage that can be made available to the system overall. They are talking with shippers as part of this discussion after Winter Storm Elliott. What do we need to do to upgrade or change the system? So those are the discussions that we're currently involved in with them and with other shippers on the system. But I don't think it should be that Transco offers up a storage rate or an additional storage service that the shippers have to pay for. I do think there should be a portion of that that's retained storage to help them balance the system. And that way, everybody that moves gas on Transco's system would pay a portion of that. Because I feel like Psnc as a contract storage holder, we're getting additional cost by paying for that we're paying for our storage. And then as part of the cash out mechanism, we're paying even more because there's not enough storage to balance their entire system.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So Ms. Jackson, you've given us a lot of really good information. I'd like to give you an opportunity. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the commission about what happened during Winter Storm Elliott, what Psnc has learned, and how we're going to be going forward that you haven't already talked about? Is there anything else that you think is important that we understand?
I will tell you, I'm very proud of the Psnc personnel and the services group that supported them. We worked very closely to make sure that we were prepared for the event. I'm happy to report that we had very little firm customer interruptions. They were very small. And we had to curtail all of our interruptible customers, but that was more of a defense mechanism because it was the Christmas holiday. So we weren't sure how long that weather pattern was going to last. So we wanted to make sure that the interruptible load did not come back on sooner than we anticipated. So just a huge joint effort for all the personnel that support Psnc. I do think we've learned a lesson, several lessons, and going forward, I think it's key that Transco not only communicate with us after the event, but going into the event. So we'll make sure that and they are in the process of updating key contacts so that we know who to call, they know who to call. And we're going to have a greater internal discussion with different groups that were affected after the storm, preceding a storm. So we want to make sure that we get all the different groups that were impacted by the storm in the planning process as we head into the storm. So I think overall communications will be better if we have a similar event in the future. But I do think that this really brings to light that Transco needs to look really hard at their system, not just on the delivery side of their system, but on the receipt side of their system. And in the past, they had stated that they did not think that the receipt side or the interconnecting pipelines were affecting imbalances on their system, but they have given us the data now where it is clear. It's not just shippers overtaking their system on the delivery side. They have some issues on the receipt side too. So the cash out mechanism needs to be looked at and modified because it's not a matter of if, but when we will see those impacts in the future. So I think over the next year, year and a half before they are required to file their rate case, we will continue to participate in those detailed discussions to figure out what we need to do going forward to protect their system, but also to protect the PSNC system and to make sure that we still have flexibility to meet our customers' needs.
Mm-hmm. And one follow-up question, when you talked about better communication going into a significant winter storm event like Winter Storm Elliott, and you said that better communication needs to happen before those type of events. Does that include communication between PSNC and your interruptible customers? Are you referring to that as well, or are you talking about in the larger setting?
I think it's in the larger setting because it's not just, I don't think it's just PSNC communicating to Transco. I think what they were doing in the northern region, if we had all the LDCs and the power generation shippers talking before that event and also the interconnecting pipelines, then that would have made us more prepared and it would have helped us when we had issues. I was on the phone with some Transco representatives talking to an interconnecting pipeline and they didn't even know the people to call. Mm-hmm. So that was key. So we need to make sure there have been a lot of changes, as y'all are well aware of, with retirements and whatnot. So we need to keep those key contact lists up to date. But our interruptible customers, we typically give them a forecasted weather update. It may not be a curtailment per se notification, but we'll tell them in advance of this winter storm, please be prepared, make sure your alternate fuel is ready. But with Christmas, that weekend, because it fell on a weekend, a lot of our interruptible customers were already planned to be shut down or on reduced load. Mm-hmm. So our major concern was preventing them from coming back on if the storm or that weather pattern continued into Monday, Tuesday. But our account reps do a great job in following up. Once the notice is given, they make a telephone contact with the interruptible customer.
Okay. Thank you. And I think Commissioner Brown-Bland has a follow-up question.
Just curious if you know or you had an informed opinion, but was there a reason that Transco didn't do net communication with the southern region or have a plan to do so? Was that just kind of weather-based that they never thought there'd be problems in the southern region?
I'm not sure why they weren't doing that. I was kind of surprised that they had those type of discussions with the northern region. Now, I will say typically we don't have that type of weather event in the south, and they do have colder than normal temperatures typically in the north. It may also be because of the RTO situation on the electric side. I'm not sure. They didn't give a firm reason why, but we think that that would be a key part of planning for a future event. Because just to know, there are a lot of protocols that go on the electric generation side where we have to notify the interstate pipelines about our anticipated demand, how much capacity we're going to be using. But I just think by having that coordinated effort in the southern region, it helps because, the more people that are looking at a problem, the better off you are, because one group may have seen something that my group didn't see. So you get the benefit of that many eyes looking at a situation.
Well, that's all the questions that we have. So, Ms. Culpepper, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay.
No
Uh,
questions.
Okay, Ms. Jackson, thank you again for coming, and we appreciate all the information that you gave us, and you may be excused.
Thank you.
Mhm. So now, motions.
Thank you, Commissioner Kimmerite. The company requests that the document entitled Direct Testimony of Glory J. Creel, consisting of 7 typed pages of question and answer testimony, which was filed publicly in this proceeding on June 1st, 2023, be marked for identification and admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Seeing no objection, your motion is allowed.
Thank you. We'd also move Creel's first exhibit, which is has a 1-page table of contents and 10 schedules. Her exhibit 2, which is 1 page, her exhibit 3 consisting of 1 page, and her exhibit 4, which is also 1 page, be admitted into evidence.
Okay. Seeing no objection, your request is allowed.
Thank you. That completes our case.
Okay. Would you like to go ahead and move to have the exhibits for Ms. Jackson entered into the record in her
Yes.
testimony?
Yes, please. We move those into evidence.
Okay. Seeing no objection, your motion is allowed.
Thank you.
I move that the pre-filed testimony of Quay Fen Son filed on July 25, 2023, consisting of 23 pages, including an appendix, be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Okay. Seeing no objection, your motion is allowed.
I move that the pre-filed testimony of Blaze C. Mishna filed on July 25, 2023, consisting of 13 pages, including an appendix, be copied into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Okay. And Ms. Culpepper, my notes may be wrong, but they indicate that it's 12 pages
There
of
was-
testimony. Is
There
that
were
correct?
12 in an appendix.
Okay, 12 pages in an appendix. Okay, thank you. Seeing no objection, your motion is allowed.
That completes our case. Thank
Okay.
you.
Are there any additional matters before we are adjourned?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So that concludes the hearing, and we appreciate Ms. Jackson coming and providing testimony and information. And briefs or proposed orders will be due 30 days after the transcript has been prepared. The hearing is now adjourned.